Let's begin this quick start by very simply building one small section of our solar panel. So we'll go ahead and open up Maya to a blank scene, and let's just take a quick look at an image that we're going to be kind of going for. Now, the actual image can be something a little bit different, but the idea is the same. We're going to be doing this sort of simple either kind of solar panel or sensor array kind of a model for maybe a sci-fi environment. And you'll have a lot of leeway on making the model really your own. We'll have specific pieces that we'll want to build, but as far as the shape of those pieces, you can modify that. But when you look at something like this and begin to kind of break it down, you can see, okay, each one of these little cells are going to be the same, okay? And then you've got a bunch of these duplicated, and then you've got each one of these panels, and each one of these panels can be the same or maybe just slightly different. And then you've got each one of these legs. There's 3 legs, but all the legs can be the same too. So you can really, in your mind, begin to break down what are the things that I can repeat, what are the things that I need to build first. So you may want to start with something small like this little panel or the little piece here, the node, and then duplicate those and begin to work your way out from there. So let's actually do that. And it's going to be a very simple process, and we'll start slow. This is a quick start, and it's only level 1, so we're going to start pretty simply. So the first thing that we want to do is to create the individual kind of solar cell. And so we need to think about the shape. So it's kind of a hex shape. So what we can do is bring in a polygon primitive. So we'll go to create polygon primitive, and let's bring in a cylinder. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit F, frame up on that. Let's turn on our smooth shading so that we can see it. So right now, if we go over into the creation node in the channel box, you can see that the subdivisions are set to 20. So that means there's 20 of these going around, which gives us a nice smooth line going around, but we don't really want that. We want to have kind of a hex shape for our solar cell. So let's go ahead and take this subdivision axis down. You can change the number here, or you can click on the title here and then use your middle mouse button to drag until you get down to 6. Okay, so we get something like that. Now it's a little bit too thick. We don't want it to be that thick, so we can come over to the height, do the same thing, and we can dial our height in. So it's something like that. Now thinking about our cell, we want to have a little bit of a ridge going around the top, so kind of a raised ridge. Now right now we don't have any geometry to be able to do that. So we can come over to the subdivisions caps, and we can add a subdivision. That gives us a line that's kind of right in the middle there. Okay, if you wanted to add more, you could add more just like that, but I think 1's going to be fine. Okay, so those are the kind of, you can modify the parameters of your primitive over here in the creation node. Now this is kind of what you do before you start to manipulate any of the components, so any of the points or the edges or the faces. So let's say we've got the basic structure down. I want to make this ridge that we're going to create a little bit thinner. So right now, if you think of this ridge, you can think of it as being kind of right here. You can see I have these little dots on. I'm going to go ahead and go into my move settings, and reflection is on. I'm just going to reset this and turn that off. So the ridge that I would create would be this thick, and I don't really want that. So what we can do is go to Edge, and I'm just right-clicking on the object. We'll go to Edge Selection, and I'm just going to double-click on that edge. Let's hit R to go to Scale. I'm just going to scale that edge out until this face is the width that I want for my ridge. So maybe something like that. Okay, now we need to create the ridge itself. So we'll select the polygons. We'll go to Faces, click, Shift, double click will give us a loop. Assuming that it's an entire loop, it'll go ahead and loop around from these quads. Now we want to raise this up. So what we can do is extrude it. So we'll go to Edit Mesh, Extrude. We can change the thickness and dial that thickness up here, and you can see how that pulls up that new geometry towards the top. Okay, and another thing that you can do when you do these extrudes is you can use the manipulators to move it. And there's 2 different axes that you can use here. So, if we wanted to rotate this, we could rotate it as well with it still selected. All right, so we've got that raised area. Now, anytime you're working with a computer model, looking at this right here, look at these edges. They're really, really sharp, very, very sharp. I mean, they're kind of aliased, but you can see that's not really a realistic look if we're trying to go for something realistic. So a lot of times you'll want to bevel the edges. Now the beveling can occur in several different ways. If you're not going to be smoothing the model, you can actually add a bevel, which we'll do here in a second. We'll look at a little bit later, if you are smoothing it, that beveling effect can come in a different way than what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and select the edges we want to bevel. So I'll select this top edge and this top edge. And let's go to Edit Mesh, and let's go to Bevel. Now you can see that each one of those edges was now turned into a loop of faces. We can go into the offset for that polybevel node over here, middle mouse to drag it interactively and get it the width that we want. So we'll take it down a little bit. And now you can see that that looks a bit more realistic, where we get a little bit of that hit of light on that edge right there. Okay. Now if that ridge isn't high enough, you can always come in here, select these polygons and kind of move them down, create a little bit more room inside there. And what we want to do at this point is create the little rims or ridges rather going across, and we'll do that with some separate geometry. So we'll go to Create, and we want these to be kind of cylindrical shapes. So let's go get, in this case, we'll get a NURBS, and let's just get a NURBS cylinder. All right, so it's now encompassing this whole thing. Let's rotate it 90 degrees in the Z. And I'm coming over here because to use the creation nodes because it's easy to see what's going on here. On any of these things, you can come in and go into the options, and you can change the creation options there as well before you actually create it. So let's go ahead, and I'm just going to change the radius. Also, as a side note, there's also interactive creation, which you can turn on, which will allow you to create your objects within your scene rather than just having them pop into existence. So I'll take the radius down to maybe 0.05, 0.08, something like that. Maybe 0.07 looks the best. We can go ahead and take the height up. We can also just scale it. And so let's move this kind of up here close to the edge, right here. And right now it's kind of penetrating down in, and that's fine. We'll kind of pull it halfway up. If you want to get rid of part of this geometry, with a NURBS object, you can select the isoparms where you want to detach it. Okay, and you want to go to Surfaces, Edit NURBS, and you want to detach surfaces, and you can get rid of that bottom surface. All right. So what we could do now is duplicate this by hitting Control D and just drag it off. And you can see here, let me freeze these transformations, which will zero this all out. And if I duplicate this and move it, this will let you know how far you've actually moved it. So we've moved it minus 0.154 units. And so what this will do is allow us to come in, and let's go to Duplicate Special. And let me go ahead and reset everything. And so we want to move it in the Z direction. So we'll create a copy. We can group it under the parent. That's fine. So this translate X, Y, and Z. We want to go minus 0.154 in the Z for every copy that we create. And let's just create a bunch of copies. So let's create 15 because we don't exactly know how many we're going to need. All right, so we made a few too many. That's fine. But you can see how each copy is the same distance apart. So then we can come in, delete these extra copies, and we can come in here, take these, and let's just move them so they're a little bit more evenly spaced. We'll kind of scale the whole thing out. And you can see how I'm scaling this. Each individual object is being scaled. If you want to scale this as a whole, we'll go into our outliner, and you can see how each one of these objects is listed individually. We can hit Control G to group those together into a single group, and then we can scale that group. So we can kind of scale that. Each one of those objects is still inside that group. So let's go ahead, and you can see how these are in a kind of a square shape. So what we want to do is come in on each one of these now, and we'll scale them out until they intersect with this object. This one's okay. These two need to actually be scaled in slightly. And then these two need to be scaled in as well. So something like that. Okay, so that gives us our first little building block of our solar panel. So the next thing we'll do in the next lesson is take this piece and begin to duplicate it to create our whole panel shapes. So we'll go ahead and do that in the next lesson.